Hey, so I wanted to make a video on the new cast on ward break support. This support can be pretty broken, and I don't see a lot of people using it yet for their main damage. So I just wanted to make a video and walk through what my build is and to see if other people have ideas to improve it as well. So it's pretty strong right now. Each of your links that are attached to a cast on ward break, so helmet, body, boots, gloves, they all trigger when your ward breaks, just like cast when damage taken. So that's really strong compared to something like cast on crit, where it's only one set of links and it uses up a link for the attack as well. So in this case, it's just the cast on ward break and everything else is attached to, in this case, my highest damage dealer is Vortex of Projection. So I'm going to jump in the map and show how the build performs, and then I'll talk through some of the difficulties of building it and explain what I did with it. And yeah, I'm sure there's many ways you can build this. For me right now, just go ahead and do a beach. For me right now, I've built it around converting cost to life cost with blood magic, because the biggest constraint we have is that it costs 200% of our 200% multiplier essentially. Yeah. So the way I've done that is with Dissolution of Flesh, so we don't care about our actual life value, and blood magic. So Dissolution of Flesh obviously is defensively can be a bit of an issue. Well, it does give you 30% more max life. You have to deal with concerns with dot because your recovery takes 2 seconds to trigger. So we mitigate that pretty well, though. You'll notice my ward is up almost all the time. If I'm in maps, it should be basically all the time. My ward should be up as long as I have something to hit. So bit of a combo for rare there. But yeah, I've got 4.5k ward, so any enemy hits against me with the ward up is being reduced by 4.5k damage. Yeah, so I'm using trigger bots with Saboteur in this case. Just go ahead and get a little bit deeper into the map. Obviously, we did almost die there to Omniphobia, but all right. So I think that's probably good enough. Let me just pause there for a moment so I can get into the meat of the build. Just probably take a moment. So
I've got some wealth for you.
The way it works is that we have this 5% chance to restore your ward on hit. That's critical for the build. By default, our ward comes back right now every 1 second, and that's because we have some faster restoration of ward. That's not critical for the build because we're not primarily getting our ward back through ward restoration. We're getting it back on hit, and so we're trying to hit as many times as possible. We're using the Frostbolt with GMP to have a target for Vortex of Projection and Ice Nova of Frostbolts. That's most of our damage alongside the Ice Spear that's also linked to GMP here. The other links are about making sure that we hit as many enemies as possible as often as possible. So Blazing Salvo, Firestorm of Pelting, got Eye of Winter in here. Glacial Cascade of the Fissure is not really needed for the build. It's just a level 20 cold gem that's in the build right now. But we're hitting rapidly, and against enemies and maps, we should always have our ward up immediately. Against bosses, it usually is up immediately as well. But there's some more variance there because we only have a single target to hit. So the critical parts of this build, I'll do a write-up later that goes into all the different nuances of the ways I've tried to build it. But the 5% chance to restore your ward on hit pairs with the trigger bots, because the trigger bots doubles all of our spells. So when we cast here, you can see there's 2 sets of Frostbolts going out. There's 2 sets of them being exploded with our Vortex of Projection, 2 sets of those Ice Spears. So that helps us hit the trigger rate for the restore ward on hit. Now, The other ascendancies I have here are not critical. You can swap these out as necessary. In fact, you could do a different assassin ascendancy and then get forbidden jewels for perfect crime. You could even do a completely different ascendancy, but you may have some trouble hitting this when you're not mapping. For mapping, I think you could do any ascendancy and make this work just fine. The 50% cooldown recovery rate seems like it's nice from here. It's really not a critical part of the build, and that's because while our cooldown is 0.27, it's 0.27 in large part because the Cast on Ward Break has 5% CDR per 100 ward. And so our 4,400 ward break is something like 225% cooldown recovery, and then we get an extra 50% on top of that from this. So, not critical. It is kind of nice to have. You could easily take this for more defenses. You could take this for more damage. Both pretty reasonable. You could also take Ward Shatter, since that does scale with us. It does okay damage, but we usually don't want to be that close to enemies. But you could easily take Ward Shatter as well. This one we're taking for the 70% increased ward from equipped items, along with the 15% here. That just helps us have more ward, which is more defenses, and then it is also more cooldown recovery. We are triggering our ward break with the Heroic Tragedy of Uhtred, which gives us this keystone. A lot of people are using this with attack builds for damage, and it's good for that. In our case, we're just using it so that every time we attack, it breaks our ward. And so then we are using Power Siphon to attack. It also gives us power charges, so we're always at max power charges. We get Culling Strike from it as well. So it's just nice to have as a Power Siphon. You could use any attack here. You could use Frenzy as well if you wanted it for Frenzy charge gain, if you had another method for power charge gain. In our case, we're getting our max Frenzies from this notable that comes with Heroic Tragedy. It can be a little bit hard to find. It's one of the rare ones, but it is gain a Frenzy charge on Ward Break. There is also a variant of this for power charges. And that is the reason I'm pathing down here, because when I got this Timeless Jewel, that was the only place I could find that I could easily reach that had the Frenzy charge on Ward Break. If you had a Timeless Jewel with this somewhere else, you could use it elsewhere, or you could drop it entirely. You can use Frenzy for your attack, or you can just do without Frenzy charges, in which case you could drop this whole bottom part of the tree, and you could get an extra Cluster Jewel or something else. So this whole bottom part of the tree I'm mostly grabbing because of this Frenzy charge on Ward Break with my build. So, a couple other things. You'll see Pain Attunement on here. This is not necessary. It's just useful for bosses, and I'll get a little bit more into how we maintain our life for bosses. But with bosses, we're often below half health, in which case 30% more spell damage can't hurt. So this is one of the ways that we help recover life. So when we drop to low life, we have a chance to just recover to full. And so against bosses, that triggers fairly rapidly. And then the other main way that we're getting back our life is with Cold Leech. So you'll see here the Eater Implicit is cold damage leeched as life. It's fairly hard to get spell damage leeched as life, but we have this Eater mod that applies to all cold damage. We have max 10 instances up all the time because we're hitting so rapidly. So it's actually a lot of leech. Instead of this, you can also get it from a Cluster Jewel. So you can get, I think, 0.2% there with a Cold Cluster Jewel, one of the Doriani's nodes. And then that should be enough, especially if you have slightly lower level gems. In my case, I've got level 29 gem here because I've got a lot of plus gem levels for cold. We got plus gem level over here. We got plus gem level in our wand, in our on our amulet. And then we have an Empower support in here that's not even max leveled yet. That's also adding to levels of Vortex protection. And all of our other cold spells are still pretty high level. So that's a lot of mana cost. We're triggering all these sockets. Against a single target, you may still have mana problems. The way I solved that was this 30% less life cost of skills while on low life. So that is an infamous modifier that Rogue Exiles drop in Mirages on gloves occasionally. And so I just recombinated that with ward gloves with decent ward in life until I hit something decent. You don't need an insane amount of ward from your gloves anyways. It wasn't too hard to hit something usable with 6 or 7 recombinates. But again, that mod is not necessary. But if you are going with a very high trigger rate and very high level of gems, you may have mana problems against single target, even with the leech. Another way to solve that is to grab 3 points over here for 5% of leeches instant. That helps a lot as well. I was able to drop those once I got the less life cost of skills while in low life. So another thing to call out is for the helmet here. I'm just using a 700 ward helmet. If you use the unique helmet, there's a cheap, earlier in the league at least it was 10C ward helmet that gives you increases and reductions to energy shield applied to ward. We already have no energy shield because we are using Dissolution of Flesh. We don't care about that not applying to energy shield. We get some increased energy shield from our intelligence. We get some in this case because we're pathing down here from these nodes. There's also a common increased maximum energy shield you can get from Uhtred notables, or from Heroic Tragedy notables. So you'll get increased energy shield if you toss on that helmet. You're probably getting a similar amount of total ward as I am. And you may even be able to drop this 70% from equipped armor items if you are scaling it more by energy shield, since that doesn't necessarily stack with this. But in my case, I just grabbed a 700 ward helmet. It was working better for me number-wise, especially if I end up dropping this bottom section of the tree, it'll be nice. The faster restoration of ward is also nice to have in the cases where you're not getting enough procs. And if you're running around the map, not attacking enemies, and getting hit multiple times, it's nice to have some recovery there, or against a boss. Not necessary for the build. We're building around this to restore our ward on hit. So another important thing, Power Siphon, we need its attack speed to be slower than our trigger rate. So in this case right now, it's 0.32. Once I get all my frenzy charges up, which go up every time I break my ward, then it gets down to 0.28, which is slower than 0.27. Now there's more nuance to that with breakpoints and all that, but generally just keep it slower and you should be fine. Yeah, that's the main thing. I'm using faster attacks leveled up to a certain point alongside my frenzy charges and other things, not using an onslaught flask so that you don't break your trigger rate. And that way when you're in maps and you've got lots of targets, you can just hold a right click and you'll just instant cast it max trigger rate. So with Dissolution of Flesh, we do have some problems, of course, with damage over time. So I'm solving that with Storm Shroud. And then I've got chance to avoid being shocked on Belt from an Essence. And then, just toss that on there along with the 41% chance to avoid being shocked here. Don't even need the chance to avoid elements that, on the shield anymore. So that's 100% chance to avoid elements. Before that, I was just using a Stygian Vice with Abyss Jewels and an Abyss Jewel in the tree. But obviously the anointment here for the +1 max frenzy charges is a little nicer. Another way to deal with ailments, though it's not perfect, is you can grab this for reduced duration of ailments on you. You're not really using intelligence anyways, unless you're using the shield that scales off of energy shield. So this is basically free, and you have a good amount of intelligence in the build. So that would let you have reduced duration. You toss on the gem as well. That reduced duration of ignites applies to all elemental ailments, and you get this is less duration of that wouldn't apply, but you get some other reduced duration of ignite, and that might be a cheaper option than the Storm Shroud way. A couple other things. The Enduring Composure here is up pretty often. That's +1 endurance charge every second if you've been hit recently. So that caps us on endurance charges, especially on bosses. If you get 100% increased charge duration, that's 20 seconds of charge time if you just get hit once in that 24-second window. So that really easy to maintain endurance charges, which help defensively. The cluster is not necessary as a 12 passive 35% effect. I was just rolling a bunch of these for other builds with other bases, and I decided to roll one for my build. Gives me 50 to all max res and 50 to chaos res, which was pretty nice, as well as damage. You can just use a large cluster jewel and then add a medium cluster jewel for crit or something of that sort. All right, calculated risk, also not necessary. I was using this earlier because early in the league because I got the forbidden jewels for like 50 to 100 CPs. It helps with getting, capped on crit or near capped on crit, so I can focus more on crit multi. But it also reduces your damage because your damage with hits are unlucky, and then vortex of projection here. It's a pretty big range that we're losing from unlucky hits. So definitely not necessary, and you can go with different forbidden jewels or no forbidden jewels at all. I'm partly doing this as well for the damage of enemies hitting you as unlucky, which is just kind of a nice modifier to have. That's about it. I guess last thing, go over my wand here. +1 cold spell skills, and then crit multi, crit chance. Since I've got pretty close to 100% crit, like maybe 80 to 90 range with lucky. That extra crit multi is nice. Flasks, the consecrated ground is really nice because consecrated ground gives us health regen, which again on bosses can be kind of difficult because we're using it for our casts. So having the consecrated ground under you is nice. We also get consecrated ground under the enemy from zealotry. And I am using a sublime vision. I just ended up buying this recently for like 10 divine. You don't need it. Without it, you're losing 6 or 7% more damage. Not critical to the build, but we are using Eternal Blessing already to have zealotry activated with no mana cost since we're blood magic. So just kind of comes with the territory. Might as well toss a sublime vision on there if you can. I'll do a write-up with more details, but yeah, eager to see what others do with this build. I'm sure that this is not optimal, and you could run lightning spells. There's some really interesting lightning spells as well you could run rather than cold spells. You could focus more on triggers and reduce the levels of the gems. So just curious to see what the optimal version of this build looks like. I think it's being underutilized right now. So that's it for me.